Hello, thanks for having me today. It's fabulous to be here. I would like to share today with you 4 little notes on how to design for the unexpected. My name is Anne, and I'm a designer. And I have a fabulous job, as I heard earlier in the big stage. This is currently where I live. It's in Berlin. I open the window in the morning and I look down to the Mauerstreifen, which is where the wall used to be. And this place is highly inspirational to me. There's still a lot of energy floating from this place where big change happened. And in a way, the past to me seems always to inspire the future. I will get back to this picture in a little bit. I work at IDEO. It's a global design and innovation consultancy, and we help companies innovate. We help build new products and services. We help transform their businesses for the future. Many times it has to do with the digital transformation that Aaron was talking about this morning. It's a lot of times about making these companies more agile, but also using design to make their ideas tangible. This picture is actually from our office in San Francisco, where I used to work and live for a while before deciding to come back to Europe and do that type of work here. And as you can see, it's a magic place. So IDEO has been around for 25 years old. We are 650 people worldwide. We work in 10 locations, and yes, we designed the first Apple mouse. We started off as a product design company, but over the years the world changed, and so have we. The challenges that our clients came and brought to us became more complex and more urgent. But we started tackling them mainly with the goal to have positive impact in people's lives. How do we do that? We put people at the core, at the beginning. We start looking at what do they need, what do they want, and how do we create something that is actually desirable, looking for the overlap of what's possible and feasible, and then obviously also what is economically viable. We're here in a room full of professionals who are driving a lot of the fundamental changes that are currently going on by designing the experiences, the technologies, and how people communicate and engage. I think we're all very, very good at dissecting lots of problems and finding new solutions that may create new problems. And that's why I think actually technology might not be the only solution. What if we think about big and new unexpected things that may happen when we start looking at the societal impact of technology first and not after the fact? Quick example. There's currently a startup creation lab taking place at Harvard that IDEO is running together with Harvard and some partners using our venture design methodology to build prototypes of the future. In this case, it's about the blockchain technology that, yes, has been floating around in the media, but frankly, no one really knows what these fundamental changes may look like. And yet, we look at it in terms of the impact these things might have on, for instance, food or sports, on real estate industry, or for the music industry. So how can we humanize something like Bitcoin and the blockchain and design the future of, in the end, trust, transactions, and participations in all these different domains? To kick off this 9-week startup creation program, we gave the participants a little puzzle to solve. They got a little origami cube, and when they opened it, they saw this QR code, and they had to figure out what this was all about. They looked into it, realized it had to do with bitcoins, and yes, at the end of the day, they managed to actually find a restaurant that they could pay with to feed their teams. This whole process felt really awkward, if not scary, and it created something unexpected that might not have been intentional. But how do we design for the unexpected in a more intentional way? And by the way, what is actually the unexpected today, and why does it matter? Here's a few notions that I uncovered preparing for this talk. One, it's obviously the things that create surprise and delight. We go by looking at, again, what are the latent needs of people, what are the benefits we can create so that they love using new services like this one. We usually do that by talking to people, by spending a lot of time with them, co-creating, testing ideas very early with them. This particular case of self-tracking devices, I think, is an interesting one, where the promise of these devices to create unexpected surprises and aha and wows, I think, is not yet fulfilled. Another notion of the unexpected is this idea of the endless opportunities overwhelming us every day. We have this basic technique that you are familiar with, brainstorms. We come up with specific rules and questions to answer to generate more and more ideas. But frankly, the newness of the ideas, I don't think, are the only and best metric to measure newness and the unexpected. This is, by the way, an eclectic brainstorm rule that a team in Singapore came up with to help generate new ideas. What would Katy Perry do? The unexpected is also acknowledging the constant change and evolution. Again, Aaron talked a lot about this morning, that our organizations are not set up to adapt and be resilient to those changes. But frankly, we all know there's only as much we can foresee in the future. So let's not waste our time to plan for it, but help adapt and evolve. But the unexpected is also about designing for people who do not yet exist. We don't know how the world is going to look like in a few years from now. Okay, let's take a change of perspective. I brought a story from China with me, where change is underway at a speed and scale that is quite unique in our world today. And the changes affect almost all part of the culture and business, and it's not just technology. Yes, it plays an important role, but not the only one. In China, one of the oldest cultures in the world, food is really central to family gatherings and celebrations, not only in France. It's what binds people together, a tangible way of showing love and respect to each other. There's this saying, a greeting actually, that says, "Have you eaten?" And it's not an invitation for dinner, it's just saying hi to someone. Yet in the recent years, the Chinese food industry has suffered some serial issues around safety. Melamine in milk production, diseased pig meat, reselling used cooking oil. We have seen all these images in the news, and they're shocking to us. As a consequence, there were two siblings, Harn and Anmao's son, an American-born entrepreneur siblings that launched Hunter-Gatherer, which is a restaurant and retail food space built around a transparent value supply chain from farm to table to grocery and shelves. IDEO helped them develop this idea of standing up for real food, where the ingredients are actually chemical-free and come from known and trusted sources. And at the end, they signed up for the purpose of providing safe, natural food from farm to table for the masses. With this purpose in mind, they set a foundation for a huge endeavor. And the statement really sums up what they wanted to achieve. It's easy to tell when a company has such a clear sense of purpose, which answers the question of why do you exist beyond profit? And that's not a question that only the CEO needs to answer, but it's actually helpful for everyone working at companies. It keeps us motivated, focused, and gives direction. Just to recap, you all heard probably about the missions of your organizations is about what you do, and we focus a lot of time on figuring out what that is. We know how you want to do it by defining some values, but not many companies can answer the question of why they actually want to do what they do. I can only encourage you to answer the question of why, because it's actually fundamental to design for something unexpected. It keeps you focused, it provides you direction and meaning at times where there's lots of distraction and lots of possibilities, and you want to say no to things that show up. So with this clear sense of purpose in mind, Anmao and Harn moved into the IDEO Shanghai offices, and they started prototyping the dishes and meals for Hunter-Gatherer. They tested packaging, they cooked countless meals, they discussed different conceptions of lunch and dinner, and how notions of freshness actually in the Chinese culture might affect even the storage systems. They invited consumers to give feedback on the different flavors and combinations of ingredients, and developed the strong sense of what a desirable dish is about. They put together a food design playbook defining the roles of people who would then continuously evolve the offer of Hunter-Gatherer in terms of what a good meal needs to consist of. And that was not only the case for the food and the offer, but also even down to the location, which they prototyped quite a bit. So the first 3 to 5 locations are built to learn and really exploratory opportunities. This is one of the more finished stores that is really about creating a seamless experience where you can wander around but also have a sense of direction. People started looking into these signature moments where they can browse the items and ingredients. And the team co-designed together with the founders the brand and positioning of how to actually express the personality of the service, down to really defining the organization that can deliver towards that. So here you see a sketch of the roles that are required and how these roles work together. We saw a couple of org charts today, and this has been built in the mentality of change all the time. So it's not set in stone, actually, but helps visualize some of the big things. And so ultimately, prototyping and designing this holistically with consumers is something we do no matter if it's a service like hunter-gatherer with physical elements or a digital service. These elements need to play together so you have a more fundamental, radical newness and unexpectedness in a server. You need to think about the offer, the organization, the business, and the brand. That's why my second note to you is about prototype it all, so you'll learn from the unexpected. You don't stumble upon these mistakes, but you think about what are your initial assumptions and how can you test those to see if you're right or wrong and what will make the results even better. As the restaurant concept came together, it was about finding the right food sources. And traditional agriculture, as you can imagine, in China doesn't actually fulfill the requirements of hunter-gatherer to really have organic certifications in place. Instead, there's a huge black market, and safety protocols around chemical use are simply not existing. And that's why these founders, by visiting farmers, realized that they had to invest in the farms themselves. They met with them, they asked questions about the methods, walked into the fields to see themselves, and wanted to really know how much the farmers believed in what the siblings were doing. How much did the farmers actually believe in this idea of safe and real food? Here you see another picture where they look at the plants. So for me, this shift from creating a restaurant and food space to deciding to invest in actually farming means a huge shift, because at the end of the day, it's about enabling others to have exponential impact. And by doing that, they decided to not just design a single venture, but becoming a platform, becoming a movement for China around real food. Many times, this is the moment where technology comes into play, where it's about how do we scale now what we started so that others can use it. There's a plan, speaking of scale, to open more than 40 locations in China, but the vision for hunter-gatherer is even bigger, which is maybe at the end it becomes an online grocery store so that everybody can order real and safe food across China. The interesting part about going first into physical space is not just to learn, but also to establish trust. Brick and mortar restaurants are there to establish trust so that you can reach scale later. We've seen some of those approaches also with Airbnb. I don't know if you know that they started very small scale, took photos themselves to put online to increase the experience of people looking into apartments. So just to sum up those 4 little notes, start with the why, prototype it all, enable others, and build trust first. I believe that you design the unexpected ultimately by designing a platform. And by building a platform, you go beyond these one-offs, another product, another app, another little service. You go beyond the expected, and you want to have exponential impact. Let's double check on that hypothesis. There's a big platform we all know, it's Facebook, the big blue. Start with purpose. We know the statement. We don't build services to make money, we make money to build better services. Mark Zuckerberg. Here visualized this purpose in this lovely little values book that they published about, remember, people don't use Facebook because they like us, they use it because they like their friends. Prototyping it all. We know the mantra from some of the office photos we've all seen, move fast and break things. How do they bring that to life? Here's the Facebook Paper app, a standalone mobile app that was actually created at the Facebook Creative Lab as a result of developing actually a tool which is called Origami, a design prototyping language that led to Paper app. And last but not least, just recently, Facebook launched instant articles, which is a way to allow publishers to serve content and their own ads natively inside the social network. A huge step, again, to enable others to create value. Build trust is an interesting one with Facebook. I looked up the story of Facebook Beacon, which was launched 2007 and got recalled just a few weeks or months later. It was a huge disaster because there was great pushback on control and privacy concerns. But Facebook Beacon became eventually Facebook Connect, and this time Facebook built in trusted authentication and real identity to allow people actually to manage their private data and profiles. So building trust became really important here. One more example to double check on the notions of building platforms, which comes from our own domain and area. So IDEO Futures is the team that is asking us, IDEO, to think about what IDEO's future looks like, which is really an interesting question, coming from being a product design company, moving into consulting, and looking at where do we want to go in the future. So IDEO Futures really works at the intersection of IDEO and the new venture system, an ecosystem that is made out of startups, VCs, etc., but most importantly, people with great ideas. Here's, by the way, IDEO Futures podcast, which I can highly recommend. It's super entertaining, made by Diego Rodriguez and Joe Gerber. It's a great look into Silicon Valley and beyond to get inspired in the new venture scene. The purpose of IDEO Futures is built upon this idea of that technology always moves faster than society's ability to integrate these new capabilities, but really the role of design is to bridge that gap. We've started to prototype a lot of these new offers. Here's just a sample of it. On the left-hand side, IDEO.org, our nonprofit team that is using design thinking and human-centered design to tackle nonprofit challenges. OI Engine, which is a software to help corporations run open innovation challenges. And IDEO U, an online school for design thinking that just launched a couple weeks ago, and I can highly recommend. GNOME is a tool to actually prototype hard and software. So if you look at the portfolio of things that IDEO Futures is doing, it's really about enabling others. There's IDEO Experiments, there's ventures that incubated inside of IDEO, there's startups and residents that move in to embrace our culture and process to get to product market fit, build their MVPs based on user needs and test them very quickly. But there's a bunch of tools that we publish. And why is this possible? Because we have a great foundation we can build on, our culture, our set of values that help us build trust amongst each other inside the company, but also outside of the company. So here's just an overview. And I think one of my favorites is making others successful. If you think that through in your day-to-day work with your teams, where you move from competition to collaboration, big things can happen. Okay, let's take a deep breath. One more thing I'd like to do, zooming out. I'm almost at the end of my talk, which is there's an interesting pattern emerging. Private entities being compared with public units of impact, meaning, for instance, IDEO as a country. Our Chief Creative Officer, Paul Bennett, quoted IDEO as a country saying, what are the values that we as citizens of that country all share, or more subtly, should start expect from each other? Or this idea of Facebook being a nation and connecting a large percentage of the population in the world. So what if we learned from nations and countries as platforms? We all know what countries and nations are made of. They have a constitution, there's a language, you have freeways, an infrastructure, there's an educational system in place, legal rules, values, holidays, symbols, food, and you can go on and on. What if we're building platforms may require to design very similar components in order to make those platforms beneficial and relevant to people? Let me take you back to where I started, this picture from the Mauerstreifen, which to me talks about the risk and the opportunity to build lots of little kingdoms and nations, aka platforms, that we try to build walls around and keep people away from leaving. Well, that may lead into very unexpected things that could happen, which is people trying to leave those platforms. And this signals really a radical shift then in perspective and influence. But something unexpected may happen if you create the context and conditions for change for the better, which to me is really about enabling others and deserving their trust first. I would like to end with a quote from Alex Steffen, who happens to be our futurist in residence, who said, "We may not be able to visit the future, but we can inhabit its possibilities together." Thank you very much.